Hello and welcome back to another disc review. Today's video we are taking a look at the Gorgon from Innova. Let's begin this review by taking a look at the profile and the feel of the Gorgon. First thing I notice is that the Gorgon has a very rounded nose, which actually feels incredibly comfortable in the hand. And in the Star plastic, it has a slight amount of dome to it, which is also consistent when it comes to the Pro plastic. But when it comes to the GStar plastic, there is an incredible amount of dome as it's very pop-topped in that GStar plastic versus Star and Pro plastic, which is considerably flatter but still has a slight dome. The one aspect that they all share is that they all have that extremely rounded nose. It's in fact one of those rare drivers that when I pick it up, it doesn't matter, bottom of the rim, the nose, it feels smooth and rounded all the way around, which means that for both my backhand and forehand grips, it never feels like the Gorgon is digging into my hand. It's also worth noting that there is a micro bead. Now when it comes to the flexibility of the plastics, the GStar is by far the most flexible. Kind of in the middle ground is going to be the Star, as it still has a lot of good give to it, but it holds its shape incredibly well. And if you're looking for a stiffer option, then the Pro is by far the stiffest. Still a little bit of give, but considerably stiffer than the other two. Well, let's face it, you are all here to see the flight of the Gorgon, so let's go ahead and see what my slower to medium arm can do with this beast of a driver. And you see that -2 when it comes to the turn. It is worth noting that the GStar plastic has a -3 for the turn. And a little bit later on in the video, we will see how that affects the flight between both the Star and the GStar. Now the Star version of the Gorgon flew a little bit more overstable, at least in the later part of the flight, than I was expecting. When I threw it on a hyzer, it didn't necessarily flip up to flat, it kind of held the arcing hyzer the entire way, and then when I did throw it flat, it did get a little bit of a meandering turn in the mid-flight, as I would expect, but then as it slowed down, it didn't keep pushing forward as I expected. It kind of more just dropped out of the sky and had a harsh dump, and as I started putting the Gorgon a little bit more on anhyzer angles, yes, it would hold those angles, it would get that turn, but towards the end of the flight, it would try to level itself out, and again, it would just kind of have a little bit more of a dumpy finish versus I was expecting, again, a forward penetrating finish. No, it was much more of kind of a, oops, I'm stalling, I'm slowing down, I am just going to dump to the ground. And one part that really surprised me about the Gorgon is that in the initial early part of the flight, it does have a decent amount of torque resistance. Not a lot, but a decent amount. So when throwing it on a forehand line, it's going to kind of hold the angle of release right out of the hand. However, where it's at its most understable is in the middle part of the flight. So yes, it's going to start out straight, but then you're going to get a meandering turn before then just again at the very end of the flight, it kind of checks up, stalls, and then kind of has that dumpy finish. And that style shot is perfect for players who are looking for a disc for effortless flex shots. It's something that's going to start out straight, get some turn around, say, an obstacle, and then check up and have a hyzer finish at the very end of the flight. Again, perfect for those wooded courses when you need to get around an object, but then also with the glide combined with that kind of style of flexing shot is great for players who are looking for more of a max distance option because you are going to get a full flight out of the Gorgon. But keep in mind that the Gorgon is still an understable distance driver, so even though it's a beast when it comes to calm conditions, it really doesn't like the wind. Alright, we've seen the lines it can hit in a field, but how about actual golf shots? This hole is a dog leg to the right, and you want something that's going to ride on an arcing hyzer without flipping up too much and hitting that tree line on the left. With that slight torque resistance and keeping it on a hyzer, the Gorgon again will just effortlessly hold that arcing hyzer line all the way around the dog leg. This is just a good example of a wide open dealer's choice kind of hole. Do whatever you want. Just throw the Gorgon flat, watch it have that nice kind of meandering turn, and just let that glide kick in before at the very end it has that harsh finish, keeping you in the middle of the fairway. This is another wide open hole, but you have that tree on the left-hand side preventing the lefty hyzer. I'm going to opt for the forehand, making sure to keep it on a hyzer angle, knowing that it's going to flip up, get a little bit of turn, and then at the very end of the flight, it's going to hyzer out and not turn into any kind of incidental roller. For this shot, you just want to get down into that landing area, and you do have quite a bit of space, but there is a Mando on the left-hand side. I'm opting to throw this on that turnover line, just kind of let it glide, let it hold that turn, then depending on the height, you might get a little bit of a fight back at the very end, but overall, it's not going to have any issues just holding that anhyzer angle. When it comes to the plastics, the Gorgon does come in a decent variety. You have Star, Pro, GStar, and also a new Glow Champion, and I apologize for this video, I did not have the Glow Champion to compare. When it came to the Pro plastic, it was noticeably more understable than the Star, so if the Star is maybe a little bit too on the overstable side for your arm, look for a Pro because it was a lot easier to get onto those turnover lines, but it still had a decent amount of fight back at the very end, but since it was a little bit more understable in the earlier part of the flight, it was easier for hyzer flipping, so it was perfect for kind of slight uphill shots or tunnel shots. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned how the GStar had a -3 turn instead of the -2, and I'm really happy that Innova made that distinction because the GStar is far more understable than even the Pro. So if you are a slower arm speed player looking to get into throwing a distance driver, or you're looking for a perfect hyzer flipping driver that is going to go down a tunnel, or throwing it on a hyzer and being able to get it to hold the most effortless flex shots, or even throwing it flat to near slight anhyzer and getting it to hold these big turnover lines, you are going to want to take a look at the GStar. It is super understable, but a lot of fun to throw. So for the lefty lines, we're going to see how all three of these plastic types stack up to each other, as well as against another fan favorite, the Innova Beast. So again, when it comes to the Star, it starts out straight, gets a little bit of turn in that mid-flight before having a pretty dumpy finish, versus the Pro almost wants to start turning right out of the hand, gets a little bit more turn than the Star, but then still has a decent finish towards the very end, versus the GStar is almost turning immediately out of the hand, and it really doesn't want to fight back until the absolute very end of the flight. You can really see just how much more progressively unstable those get. And then you have the Beast and Star plastic, and it really resembles the flight of the Gorgon in the Pro plastic. The Gorgon in Star, between all four of these, is definitely the most, as I say, overstable. Not saying it's an overstable disc, but it has the most overstable flight, particularly at the end of the flight, but then also gets the least amount of turn in the middle. And then the Pro is kind of that kind of good Goldilocks middle ground. It's understable in the middle of the flight, but it still has a good enough bite at the very end, versus the GStar is just a very effortless turnover. That is never windy days. That is always going to be for the most understable turnover shots. And then the Beast, which really, again, it just mimics the Pro version of the Gorgon. So I'm not really sure what the whole big difference between the Beast and Gorgon is. They both seem to be very much the same, but I'd be interested to see, in maybe in different plastics and different weights, how they all compare. Well, thank you all so much for watching. I absolutely love the Gorgon for slower arms as an effortless flex disc and max distance driver. I think this is going to be very popular for players with those slow to medium arms. As always, please subscribe if you haven't already. It is one small click for you, but it really helps out the channel. I greatly appreciate the support. Also, if you want to try the Gorgon for yourself, visit GreatLakesDisc.com. Use that code LEFTY to save yourself 10%. And comment down below what discs you want me to review in 2025. Until the next one, everyone, keep banging chains.